But I've read that Hamsun's protagonists were individuals pitted against society. People who don't fit in, people who don't fit the mold, black sheep, rebels, rejects, persona non gratas. Often arrogant and filled with pride one moment and then self-loathing the next. The only people worth writing about. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always, and hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. Today is the Norwegian author Knut Hamsun's Mysteries, originally published in 1892. This was a gift from a kind friend and patron, Steve. Thanks a bunch, Steve. Really appreciate it. And thank you very much for the supplementary material. That definitely helped with this review. Real quick, if you would like to kindly support this show at no financial cost to yourself, crazy, right? Please, if you're going to buy something on Amazon, anything, but the more expensive the better, use the Amazon link below. The show gets a kickback at no cost to you. Things aren't more expensive, they're the same price, you won't even notice it. So if you'd like to support a book reviewer but you don't necessarily have the funds to donate on Patreon or otherwise, then that is a wonderful way and I sincerely appreciate it. It only costs you a click. Brilliant. Thanks a bunch. This is one of the stranger pieces of fiction I've read lately, and a very odd tone to start off the new year, which is great. I love odd tones. I've never read anything quite like it, though you can obviously see the influence from Dostoevsky. It's always good to read something that I feel completely unsure about. Unsure of whether I liked it, unsure of whether I understood it, unsure of whether or not it's possible to be entirely understood. So with that completely vague and confusing introduction, onward. This is a very strange love story, but it's really the stream of consciousness of one man as he disintegrates into complete and total madness. Right up my alley, basically. I would just like to point out really quick this beautiful cover. Books don't often look this good, so I was very happy to see that. I haven't talked about Knut since Hunger, which I reviewed years back when I was still in LA, and love that book. Great book, excellent book. Highly influenced by Crime and Punishment, which I just finished. Did not enjoy that. Liked Hunger more. This novel came immediately after Hunger. This was the next novel in Hamsun's canon, or the canon of Knut. Knut Hamsun was concerned not so much with plot or character, but rather with the expression of human consciousness on the page, right? The capturing of its essence in literature, available to be transmitted and experienced by the reader. Hunger, without question, is one of the finest demonstrations of this goal. And actually, a lot of people, Hamsun has said that a lot of people have said that the character in Hunger behaves the way he does because he's starving to death. But actually, Hamsun is like, no, it's actually because of his personality. So that's interesting. While the publication of that novel brought lukewarm reception, Hamsun was young and fiery at the time, right? And wanted to one-up himself, and all the locally famous authors, it seemed. Particularly Ibsen, who he criticized to no end. Tolstoy too, mercilessly. He beats the shit out of Tolstoy in this. Knut Hamsun was a pioneer of literary modernism, right? He was writing modernist novels before it was a thing. Hamsun had something to prove, right? He was a really disagreeable character, but really confident. He was handsome, he was really smart, he was pioneering of this new style which would eventually become modernism. Think like Virginia Woolf, Marcel Proust, James Joyce. Maybe the most extreme example being Samuel Beckett. I read that somewhere in my research for this. I can't remember where though. But yeah, definitely Beckett is the most you want to lay out the mind of a neurotic on the page. There you go. Frankly, it's exhausting to read. It's really more of just like experimental fiction. It's just like gobbledygook at that point. But interesting nonetheless, if you're into stream of consciousness stuff. In the novel's introduction, James Woods, the author, says that Hamsun's novels throttle reason. That's a very accurate description of them. They are a total mess, not unlike Dostoevsky, but even Dostoevsky has more caricatures like characters that kind of stand for things. Whereas with Knut Hamsun's novels, at least the two that I've read, Hunger and this one, his first and his second, they are the polar opposite in that respect. These characters are they're more like real people. They're complete contradictions. They're incorrect, right? They do one thing and then say another and then so on and so forth. They're bizarre, they're odd. They don't stand for full-formed, solid ideas. They're more like real people, like real human consciousness, which is constantly going back and forth on itself and warring with itself and so on and so forth. There's parts of Raskolnikov and Crime and Punishment that are very much like that. So Dostoevsky doesn't entirely do it. I don't want to suggest that all of his characters are so full-formed ideas. But I've read that Hamsun's protagonists were individuals pitted against society. People who don't fit in, people who don't fit the mold, black sheep, rebels, rejects, persona non gratas. Often arrogant and filled with pride one moment and then self-loathing the next. The only people worth writing about. So Hamsun has written one of the strangest love stories I've ever read. Far different from Hunger, Mysteries is a story about a man named Nagel, or Noggle, who arrives in the community of a small town in rural Norway, on the edge of a fjord. He's a total eccentric. He wears this really garish yellow suit, carries around a violin case with no violin inside, and seems to try and find various indirect ways of giving people money. Thus he earns this reputation as this kind of a wealthy, eccentric, oddball musician. But the truth is, he can't really play the violin, not very well at least. And his pretensions to wealth are fake. Where he got his money, nobody knows. But he does strange things like send himself documents to the hotel where he's staying. A lot of the story takes place in his hotel, where he's just holed up, essentially. He sends these messages to himself in the hotel. So, they look like offers for land or something, and he just leaves them out on his hotel table so the staff will see, and they'll gossip about it, and it'll look like he's got these big deals going through, but he doesn't really have any of that. He's as Hamsun himself says, a poseur, He's a poser, he's a fake, he's an imposter. And gradually, as he introduces himself and starts hanging out with the people in the town, we see he possesses these sort of OCD qualities, wherein he's confessing certain things that he's doing to people he likes or falls in love with, specifically this one woman named Dagny, in hope of them reciprocating that love in spite of his manipulative intentional deceit. I think he's hoping that they will love him in spite of his flaws because he is so boldly honest. Nagel frequently experiences these moments of almost ecstatic visions or memory or ecstasy, and he'll suddenly tell a story to whomever he's speaking to. He'll tell them these anecdotes, strange events from his life, or stories he heard, or people he knew, or dreams, sometimes very beautiful, always filled with mystery. All of these mysteries, right? He befriends a downtrodden but very kind man nicknamed Minutin, the Midget. Though I'm not sure if it's because of actual dwarfism, or an actual disability, or because his name sounds like it, and there was this drunken moment at a party in the past where somebody called him that, and it stuck. And he suffers immense cruelty from the townfolk. He's like dancing in the street for money and stuff like that, and he's harassed by this local deputy. Nagel once actually saves the midget from this deputy in the hotel bar. It just, it illustrates the cruelty of small town folk, the kind of stale, gossipy, provincial nature of it all, the kind of grim, bleak social hierarchies that form. We don't know anything really about Nagel's past. He pretends to be an agronomist, but he frequently tries to bestow money on the local denizens indirectly. So he has some, and he's made it seem like he has a lot. He wants it to seem like he has a lot, but we really have no idea. We don't know if he's, we can't really tell when he's just being humble or when he's being braggadocious, which is one of the cool things about the book. We really can't tell when he's telling the truth. It seems he's well-traveled. There's a strange tale of him following a woman in San Francisco once into the Chinese section of town, into an opium den. And when she dies shortly thereafter, her ghost actually follows him around throughout life and appears from time to time. It definitely has a bit of a gothic novel madness quality to it. So yeah, Nagel falls in love with this local woman. By love, I mean like total unyielding obsession. He falls in love with this local woman who is engaged, named Dagny, whom he follows around incessantly and obsessively. At one point actually killing her dog with a vial of cyanide because it bit him as he was trying to spy on her outside her house in the dark at night, which is exactly what a dog's supposed to do. So he's kind of a fucked up dude. It seems that Dagny may have this kind of effect on men in town. As Nagel arrives, he hears of a young poet who recently slashed his wrists in the woods over his inability to have her, and Nagel actually attends his funeral. So it's this whole foreshadowing. As far as the narrative, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's just when it branches off into these weird, random seeming anecdotes or visions or ecstasies or whatever you want to call them. It's a very strange novel. So what is Mysteries, I, like everyone else, have no clue. It's almost the same as asking, like, what is human behavior or what is human consciousness? What is this strange temporal collection of disjointed narratives and anecdotes that we're composed of and find ourselves in? What the absolute hell is going on? There's no answer, right? And when the intensity of it all, when he's like ruined all his relationships and the walls are closing in, the humiliation and exhaustion raises to a fever pitch, and Nagel tries to drink his cyanide, but he fails. Something's happened. Somebody's replaced his cyanide with water. and it could have been several people. It is similar to Dostoevsky, who was an influence and not a contemporary, but Hamsun was just after Dostoevsky. It's similar in the style of, the expelling of neurotic minutiae in a frenzied attempt at capturing the mental processes of human consciousness. As in this character's whole, I'm confessing to you about how manipulative I am, because I want you to know all of me, and to love me purely for who I am, with no pretense whatsoever. He contradicts himself, at first tearing someone down, berating them, then going back and trying to kind of explain himself and apologizing. He spends most of his time locked up in the hotel. And it has that kind of gothic quality that Crime and Punishment had. Imprisoned characters ruminating obsessively about this or that. A lot of desperation in the writing. The other part of Nagel's life is spent walking through the woods or around town or to the parsonage, which is, this church in the town, which everything is kind of a symbol for orienting yourself, it seems, in the novel. Nearby is a fjord, there's boats, A really beautiful atmosphere and environment. It actually makes me really want to visit Norway after reading it. Hamsun himself was a passionate iconoclast. He had kind of a hammer-wielding notion of what modern literature should be. He was a staunch individualist, right? Really against conformity, it seemed, which I can appreciate. He wasn't at all afraid of attacking the cultural giants of his time, and he was apparently quite competent to do so. He went on a lecture tour around Scandinavia, and they became like these kind of big events. In his biography of Hamsun, Robert Ferguson writes, "All the heroes of antiquity, ancient and modern, are dismissed, including Shakespeare, Plato, and Dante." For Hamsun maintained that the work produced by these authors had passed beyond the state of literature and become, in effect, not books, but symbols, and the authors themselves no longer writers, but authorities. So, yeah, Hamsun is staunchly anti-authoritarian, and this is very, very ironic because later we'll get, want to talk about contradictions, and we'll get to it. He rejected, too, the notion of writers as the moral doctors of their society, and preached the gospel of total individuality, with authors dedicated to the creation of works which, if necessary, would only be comprehensible to a tiny proportion of the population. An author was for him a thoroughly subjective being, a pair of eyes, a heart, someone who created from passion, not a pseudo-rational pseudo-scientist creating characters after the latest scientific theories of human personality. And later he says, "I will make my hero laugh where sensible people think he ought to cry," he proclaimed. And why? Because my hero is no character, no type who laughs and cries according to the theories of some school, but a complex, modern being. I will therefore have contradictions in the inner man considered as quite natural phenomena, and I dream of a literature with characters in which their very lack of consistency is their basic characteristic. Not the only, not the dominating characteristic, but central, decisive. Very cool. Yeah, so he had some great ideas about what literature should be or what it could be, and he was a pioneer. Massively influential. Hamsun was a big influence on Henry Miller, for example. He also won the Nobel Prize in Literature. Well, okay. Hamsun was the very embodiment of the word contradiction. You see, he won the Nobel Prize, and then he gave it as a sign of admiration to Joseph Goebbels. He also wrote an obituary filled with praise for Adolf Hitler. Hamsun was a Nazi supporter, like a big supporter of Hitler. There's speculation, I think, that simultaneously he was kind of unwinding mentally. This was later in his age, because this was written in 1892, so this is 1930s. But unfortunately, I don't think that's the case. Doesn't seem like it. It seems he was pretty adamant. Max von Sydow of, Ingmar Bergman fame he played the knight in The Seventh Seal. He played Hamsun in a biopic, and he speculated that it was in no small part because of Hamsun's hatred of the English and English imperialism and the English Empire, right? Who knows? He's certainly not the only one around this time, the only writer whose views did not age well. There was Ezra Pound, of course, and then there was Louis Ferdinand Céline, and I'm sure there are more. But anyways, after the war, Hamsun was actually charged with treason by his country. But I don't think he was convicted because of his mental instability or something like that. So yeah, how much was him kind of going south mentally? I don't know, but yeah. Sometimes you have to separate the art from the artist. I really can't think of a greater example. He was a genuinely weird dude. He was like a shit talker, right? I mean, he was a troublemaker. He was a punk. Again, from the introduction by Wood. Hamsun could be as bewilderingly arbitrary in person. Robert Ferguson, his English biographer, tells a story of Hamsun visiting a hotel in Nice. Barking at the staff in Norwegian and refusing to tip, He was quickly the most unpopular man in the hotel. Then at the end of his stay, he delighted everyone by dispensing enormous tips. He gambled heavily, drank stormily, one binge lasted a week, and attitudinized wildly. He was the kind of man who wanted to be thrown out of parties. His Nazism was a kind of anarchism, based more on his irrational hatred of England than on any natural fascism. He and his wife may have been the only people in the whole of Norway who wanted Germany to bring England to its knees, as he madly implored in one wartime newspaper article. But, according to the Ferguson bio, this novel is actually the closest representation of Hamsun himself that he produced. Like it's the closest thing to his real life, apparently. As Hamsun himself puts it, the hero of mysteries is a poseur, a pathological phenomenon who is part madman and part genius. Yeah, you can definitely, that's just a direct quote from Hamsun, but you can definitely sense the Henry Miller influence, for sure. So if you read this one, you're definitely going to get whiffs of, Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, Black Spring, for sure. So if you're a Henry Miller fan, I highly suggest you pick this one up, yeah. Not as a body as turkey sandwiches, but, paved the way. According to Hamsun, it's the story of a man who finds life meaningless and is driven insane. Everyone laughed, and it was a while before they got back to Tolstoy. He was a great writer and a great spiritual force. He is not a great intellect. He is a mediocrity, and his ideas are no more profound than the euphoric teachings of the Salvation Army. A Russian without his rank and title, and without his million rubles, would hardly have attained fame by teaching a few peasants how to repair shoes. It doesn't mince words. And a little while later, as this goes on for some time, God, how Tolstoy labors to eliminate humanity's happy vices and make the world full of love of God and mankind. It just fills me with shame. Maybe it sounds impertinent to say that an agronomist is ashamed of a count, but that happens to be the case. It would be different if Tolstoy were a young man struggling against temptation, or if he had a battle to fight and tried to win it by preaching virtue and clean living. But his sources have run dry. He has no more humanity left to struggle with. You may say, but this has nothing to do with his philosophy. But it has everything to do with it. I would just wait until old age has made you self-satisfied and callous. Then you go to the young man and say, renounce all these superficial trappings. The young man ponders, sleeps on it, and comes to the conclusion that this indeed is what the Bible preaches. But he doesn't renounce. He goes on sinning happily for the next 40 years. And so it is. When the 40 years are up and the young man has grown old, he saddles his snow-white mare and rides off with his crusader's banner held high in his bony hand, calling out a pious message of renunciation to the youth of the world. It's a comedy that endlessly repeats itself. I get a kick out of Tolstoy. I'm glad the old boy is still capable of so much munificence. He will surely be rewarded by going to his maker in the end. But after all, he is only doing what so many old men have done before him, what many others will continue to do after he is gone. It's as simple as that. It's almost better than food just for that, but yeah. I still have yet to read Tolstoy, so I guess I shouldn't get too smitten. But I did take a look at some quotes from War and Peace, and I was just like, oh, it's really bad. We'll see. So what do I think overall? Well, the display of consciousness, given the time it was written, is impressive, and the drunken tirades against people or authors of authority, specifically Tolstoy, were very entertaining. I didn't really care for the protagonist and essentially disengaged somewhere back there. I did really like the ending. I really liked the ending, actually. And this is one of those books where I feel like, wait another 3 years, 5 years, come back to it, reread it. It's totally possible. My opinion will completely have changed on it. But I mean, after he becomes like a simpering slave to Dagny, and then after failing at that and he tries to woo this spinster who doesn't deserve to be taken advantage of at all, he's just sort of like awkward to be around, like you sort of want to leave the room he's in, but you can't because he's the protagonist of the book. And so then it's like, this isn't very enjoyable at all. How to put it? Yeah, that's basically what it was like. Yeah, Hamsun would have been a difficult character to have as a friend, for sure. And this character, while impressive in his kind of construction, in his random outbursts, in his volatility, in his contradictions, everything, he's fascinating, but he's somebody who's fascinating from, that you want to keep at a distance, right? So while there are parts of him that are fascinating and admirable, his disagreeableness and courage in some cases, while that's all impressive, his self-sabotaging sensitivity and kind of solipsistic narcissism eventually are just kind of insufferable, even when it seems like he's trying to help people in his own way or whatever. I know that, we're not here to judge, I'm not here to judge the character, I'm here to judge the novel, but the novel is really this character. I mean, it really is. It is entirely this character and his deranged is not the right word, but his kind of disintegration, his mental disintegration. But that's kind of the wrong word too, because there's a lot of beauty in the novel. I don't want you to get confused. There's a lot of strange, mysterious, beauty that kind of emerges from his anecdotes and his stories, and just sort of the whole atmosphere of the book in general. But I really just did not enjoy spending time with the character. I guess that's what it is, you know? When he gets drunk and he just he gets drunk and he just goes on these like sloppy tirades and it's just these monologues that are just like, oh God, it's pretty real, you know? It's like you've totally had that person that you've had to endure in a bar or wherever, you know, or at a party. So I don't know. And there's always this underlying selfish motive at work, you know? And that's very interesting because, you know, that's everybody, right? Even those who seem selfless or generous. There's always some intrinsic selfish nature at the heart of every action, every single one, however much that it doesn't seem that way. So for that reason, the book is very interesting because you see the entirety of a person, right? Whereas a likable protagonist or somebody you might want to spend time with would certainly be far easier to tolerate, but simultaneously, for that very reason, the same reason we enjoy the company of anyone, I imagine, it's because they're partially or totally a lie. Even just lying by omission. We don't see the full scope of the person's behavior. If we did, they'd probably be intolerable. And that goes for all of us, certainly not just him. If we were to see all the flaws and contradictory behaviors within ourselves and each other, we go insane. Society is a stabilizing lie we all tell ourselves. The game we play in order to keep the game going and not kill each other, right? I won't spoil the ending, but I loved it, and I think I finally understand the euphemism, painting for the fjords. If you don't get that, please type into the YouTube search bar, Monty Python, parrot, and come on, get with it. I probably, I don't know, old soul. This is an expat. A note. When reading the very, very last chapter, pay very close attention to the dialogue between Martha and Dagny, as it reveals that Minutin, the midget, was not in fact what he seemed. And Nagel was correct in his seemingly insane assertions after all. I missed it the first time, actually, so watch for that. So better than food? No, it almost was for me. But I liked several parts of the book and the overwhelming theme of people are not, as in never, what they seem to be. But yeah, no, just wasn't feeling it. A little too disjointed to really sink my teeth into. For some reason, I always kind of just felt outside of it, not invested in the characters at all, didn't care for any of them, didn't want to spend time with them. Wasn't really interested in them or learning more about them. The random integration of Nagel's memories, stories, and travels was sort of interesting, but kind of just that, which is random. A lot of the novel did feel improvised, and it seems that it was, kind of. It was based on Hamsun's real life, you know, and he was living in a hotel, and he was writing this between tour dates, I think, like lecture tour dates in Scandinavia. He was going through a couple of different relationships, but it felt unfinished. I don't mind unpolished, necessarily, and this certainly had that quality sometimes, but it seems that Hamsun still left something on the table with this one. Don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it. It's tough. It didn't have the satisfaction that Hunger did. As a manifestation of human consciousness, yeah, it's very interesting. And I can certainly see its historical importance. As a novel you want to sit with for 340 pages, I wouldn't call the novel bloated. It overstays its welcome. But if you like Dostoevsky, Nietzsche, Thomas Mann, Marcel Proust, Virginia Woolf, Henry Miller, and Samuel Beckett, this is totally up your alley, and I highly suggest you check it out. I didn't care for it too much this time. But I might reread this one, actually. Yes. Especially if I ever pick up Norwegian, which I would love to, but you know, that's a ways away. Coffee time. For those of you who are new, thank you very much for stopping by and checking out the show. I take all the names of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more to the show. I place their names in this mason jar. For every review I do, I shake this thing up, I pull out a name, and whoever's name I pull out is sent a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. I roast coffee and it's delicious. It's currently from Myanmar. I love it. Not for long though. We're gonna have to move to Ethiopia or something in the African regions probably, or Brazil. If you would like to help support the show and get in on that, you can go to patreon.com/booksarebetterthanfood and donate $5 or more per video to be entered. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much. Keeps the lights on, so to speak. For just $1 or more, you'll get access to the Patron-Only Reviews, plus all of these reviews ad-free, and also the cool stuff listed below. So, thank you very much. Also, I'm selling these bookmarks. They are $4 each plus shipping. It's just my face with a nice little reminder on it. So if you'd like one of those, you can hit me up using the email below or DM me on Instagram, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you. Happy to sign them too if you like. Thank you very much to all my patrons, and best of luck. Okay, here we go. Maria H. Thank you very much, Maria. Really appreciate it. You're going to receive Mysteries by Knut Hamsun, plus a bag of delicious coffee, and I hope you love both. Thank you so much. Cheers. All right, well, that is all I've got for you today. Hope you enjoyed, and always remember, bring a book wherever you go. All right, take care of yourselves. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.